back, everybody, to another episode of Untamed Unfiltered. My name is Aaron Provencio, and you're probably wondering, where's Amanda? Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. She's actually not going to show up for this one because this episode is going to be a little bit different. Today, we're talking about connecting with nature. And I think that it's important to show people that this connection with nature, this idea of helping others to find that connection, to find that relationship with nature, is something that's ongoing. And that if we hope to continue to push these conservation and natural resources issues into the future and try to solve them as a society, we need folks who are going to be able to help us do that. And so with that being said, I'd like to welcome Ally Gran and Sean Washington to the show. How's it going today, guys?
So good. It's a beautiful day.
Everything's wonderful. It might be a little rainy outside, but I love it here.
Love that. Love that. Well, that's awesome. So as I mentioned, this episode is all about connecting with nature. And so I brought in Ally and Sean to tell us a little bit about how they help others to find and cultivate that relationship with nature as well. So would the two of you mind going ahead and starting off by telling us a little bit about what you do?
Hi, my name is Ally Gran, and thank you guys so much for having me today. I am coming to you from Northern California at Redwood National and State Parks. I work here as an interpretive and education park ranger. So when we try to connect people with ranger, we do it in a couple different ways, especially during a normal year. So back in 2019, things look a little bit differently. During the summer, we'll be doing primarily interpretation. So we'll be in visitor centers, out on trails, teaching people about the resources around us. So the trees, the ferns, the ocean, the tide pools. We have a lot of really cool things to talk about here at Redwood. In the fall and in the spring, we do education programs. So I work as an educator at Wolf Creek Education Center, which is basically a summer camp for kids. So fifth graders come and they spend 2 nights in the Redwoods where we get to teach them about the watershed, the prairie, and the old growth. And it's so fun being able to teach kids in the resource. And I really miss that because 2020 and 2021, of course, look a lot different for everyone. So we've kind of had to change the way that we're connecting people with our resource because not as many people are coming to the parks right now, depending on the park, of course, but we're not able to be in person with people. So we've been using social media. We came out with a couple video series last summer, and then we've been doing all of our education programs online, which is obviously super different from a 4-hour in-person, really cool watershed program versus a 1-hour Zoom program. So hopefully at some point this year, maybe next year, we'll be back in person with people. But I really love my job and connecting with people with nature. It's very fun, but that's me.
Nice. So I work my name is Sean Washington, and I work at Martin Park Nature Center, which is a kind of like a nature preserve in the middle of Oklahoma City, and it's in what's called the Cross Timbers region, where the end of the Great Plains starts and you get the Eastern Forest beginning, and it's this cool ecosystem that not many people know about. And my job specifically is program specialist. So I come up with all the different hikes, the kayaking, and all the different programs we teach to try and educate people about what is going on outdoors, how to get involved, and sort of showcase to a lot of people here in Oklahoma, my home state, that there's so much more to this state that they don't realize, and that Oklahoma is hands down the best state in the U.S. for wildlife. Just no one has looked at it yet.
Well, that's awesome. So as you mentioned, Sean, you're from Oklahoma, and I grew up in Fort Collins, Colorado, which, as we all know, is where we all went to school. But because of that, I can owe my personal connection to nature a lot to my access to the Rocky Mountains and Rocky Mountain National Park. I mean, I was never a 10-minute drive away from being on some incredible hiking trails. But I also think it's important to recognize that not everybody has that access and that ease of entry into the outdoors. And so one of the things that I think is so important about finding ways to connect people with nature is recognizing that everybody is in a different space and everyone has a different level of comfort or access to the outdoors. And so I'm just wondering, how did the two of you find your own personal connection to nature?
So I grew up in southern Minnesota, which is very plainy. There's a lot of beautiful trees. We have amazing autumns. There's a lot of water. But I grew up camping a lot with my family. So I can really plug my parents for that. But it was really my grandparents that showed me how to appreciate nature. So I actually brought something with me. This is my first tree book. And my grandparents gave it to me in 2003 for my 6th birthday. So they were the first ones. I mean, a lot of people go camping, a lot of people take walks in the park, but they were the first ones that really pointed out the different trees that we have around us. And they brought me birding, which is something that I still absolutely adore. And they had me do junior ranger programs to learn about the natural environment around me. And I think they were really the ones that showed me how to find those really beautiful little things in nature. Which eventually brought me to the National Park Service and to Colorado for the first time, where we all eventually went to school together, which is so fun. And that's how I became a park ranger eventually. So I think it was really my grandparents and some of those experiences that I had growing up camping. A lot of high school science teachers, middle school science teachers, just inspiring me to go out and ask questions and to dig deeper into just plants in the sidewalk. How do they grow there? Just finding those little details. And I still do that a lot, and I really appreciate those people for it.
That's amazing. Like honestly, for me, I would say it mostly. I can't say it really started with any one person or place. It was more so gradual because here in Oklahoma, we don't have any national parks. We have and all of our state parks are really far removed from the city. Like I think the closest state park is about a 45-minute drive, and that is mostly like recreation themed, where it's a lot of boating, a lot of boating and like a fishing, and it's built for that, not really for wildlife or going and watching things. The closest you're going to get to that is about an hour and a half away, and that wasn't really a common thing to go and do. Um, but I gradually got into it from watching TV and seeing shows like all of the nature stuff on PBS when I was younger. I was the little kid who'd sit at, I want to say, second or third grade and watch a whole PBS documentary about this one animal because I was like, wow, what the heck? I didn't know this existed. And then go to school and talk about it with the teacher because I'm like, can we learn about this next week? They can't just change their schedule, but apparently. um, um, but I think that was probably a lot of it, and realizing that there's so much more to one where I lived than what I saw. Because what generally see is like people who go hunting, fishing, and boating, and nothing wrong with those three activities. But I thought that was the entirety of what you do outdoors, and that's the mindset of a lot of people here in Oklahoma because that's all you ever get to see. But in seeing other people how they enjoy the outdoors and then learning more about what else is there, I just fell head over heels for birds and trees and fish and reptiles and all of it. And I'm the one person in my family who will go camping just randomly, and they all look at me crazy as if that's just not what you're supposed to do.
Well, I think it's cool that all of us sort of had a different experience, a different coming into our own personal relationship with nature. And I I think that's part of the reason that I really wanted to have both of you on is because we, as the three of us, and of course people all across the country and all across the world, are kind of what could be considered this next generation of natural resources or conservation, whatever you want to call it. Because the three of us are younger. I'm 24. I mean, we're all kind of on the bottom edge of the 20s, and we're all getting into exactly, and we're all kind of coming into this field and trying to find a way to make the biggest impact. And so what do you think is the value of younger folks like us, younger people like us, trying to help not only maintain our relationship with nature, but also helping others to find and cultivate that relationship as well?
Um, that's a really good question. And I feel like there is a lot of, I think of a lot of things, and I think the number one aspect of connecting with nature to me is happiness. I think this next generation is going to be very stressed, and right now we're living in a really stressful world. There's a lot of tension and anxiety, and I think there's a lot of science that shows that going outside and stepping into nature and nature bathing is really good, not only for your blood pressure, but for your soul. And I think that that's going to be a really important thing for the future generations. Stepping outside and not just going for a walk, but for going for a walk and then looking at the trees around you and appreciating the colors of the fall, or that bird that's eating a worm over in the tree, finding those really beautiful parts of the world, especially in the future. And then the second part of connecting with nature is I think about it every day with the climate crisis. I think of it in a couple steps, I guess, when I'm teaching kids. I like to think of it as instilling that passion for nature. So finding that happiness that nature brings you, so that you want to be a steward of nature. And being a steward would then lead you to maybe making some decisions about the environment or voting for the environment, and doing things that will eventually help with the climate crisis. So like, for example, when I'm teaching at Wolf Creek, I love to take the kids out to the watershed, and part of our watershed program is going and finding salamanders and mayflies and all the fun stuff that lives in our stream. So they're making that connection with nature, and their eyes get all wide and they get all excited. And then we kind of hit them with the sad part about how watersheds are actually pretty, I can't find my word right now. There's a lot of bad stuff that affects our watersheds. We talk about erosion, and here in California, we talk about all of the wildfires and about algae and pollution. And the kids kind of realize, like, oh man, all this cool stuff that I just found in the river is now being affected by all of these things happening in this huge watershed. So then we get to brainstorm about ideas of how they can make a very small impact on this crisis that's going on, not only in our watersheds, but in our ocean and in our forests and in our whole world. And they're like, oh, well, we could bring reusable bags to the grocery store, and we can use reusable straws, and maybe I won't leave the water running. And they get really, really excited about it. And I really think it's because of that connection that we just made and are making at Wolf Creek. So I think those are probably the two biggest things about connecting any age to the outdoors, is making sure that we stay a very happy species, and then also trying to prevent the upcoming climate crisis.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And thank you for taking my answer. That's awesome. But I get to add to that, I guess, one of the things that I've always tried to do, because like as I said, like my introduction to like the environment was very gradual, and it came from like watching movies and reading books and stuff like that. One of the things that I realized now that really kind of helped me understand how broad those connections were and how important they were was in sort of focusing on the hopeful aspects of it. And that's one thing I always try to communicate with people, because it's at Martin Park, it's me and four other people. And anytime I communicate with the public, even if they ask me about like, oh, why is, because we have a turtle in there on exhibit, and she was hit by a car, and so she has like a notch in her beak, and they're like asking questions about it. And I'm like, I always try and make the saddest things as hopeful as possible, because we live in an age where all we're getting is doom and gloom, and I don't want to keep feeding people that, because there's no reason that that's going to help them want to help if they feel like, oh well, it's just another bad thing to add to the pile. Well, here's like, it's like the Wally thing where there's a little plant in a boot. Just there you go, it's a little plant.
Yeah, I think that, and that's another reason why I wanted to get the two of you specifically, because I know, and I'm sure we all do know, people who are field biologists and scientists and policymakers and folks kind of in our age group from our graduating class who are out there doing really important stuff. And not to take anything away from that, but I think that there is a lot of importance to this education, this outreach, engaging with the public and having these sometimes difficult, sometimes sciencey and nuanced, maybe perhaps complex conversations. I mean, watersheds aren't easy. Neither are conversations about turtles getting hit by cars. Like, that's a hard conversation to have. And I think that that's one of the things that I've always really had at heart, is that it's hard to get people to care to work for something or to work to preserve something if they don't care about it, if they don't know about it. And so I don't know who told me this, but it's kind of my mantra all the time, is an engaged and educated public is a very powerful thing. And it's really going to take all of us moving forward. If we're going to try to, as you said, stop this coming climate crisis, stop whatever else it is, we really need as many people on this boat so we can start to steer it away from kind of where we're headed. And so, Sean, I guess I have a question for you specifically, because for those of you who, I guess most people who are watching this who might not be familiar with Sean's work, he does a lot of really robust stuff on the website. He's got a really good Instagram, which I'm going to tag below. But I'm curious as to, why did you choose to kind of go that route? I mean, I was on your website a couple of days ago and it's pretty in depth and I was very impressed. Why did you decide to kind of go the digital media route, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, there's two reasons. Reason number one is because I'm a scientist and I hate scientific papers. I hate reading them. And I don't think anyone should ever have to read any more of them, because God, I hate it. Absolutely the worst parts of any classes was writing them. I could not stand it. And that sort of made me realize something, that if one of the issues is of like science communication is that the public is inherently not, I don't want to say not educated in the subject, but like doesn't completely understand the subject, then why is it we're only communicating in a way that's very unfriendly to the public to read? So I thought, why not try and take these things, do all the hard work, read some of the papers, and then spit it out in a way that the public is interested, add memes, make it cartoony, make it really funny to read and watch. That way people can learn without feeling overwhelmed, because one of the issues with science is that, and this is from family members when I go on random spiels about cats or about different other nature things that get me excited, is after about 2 or 3 seconds, you can see their eyes glaze over and it's just going immediately over their head. And I'm like, that's an issue, that's consistent with science. So we need to break it down in a way that it keeps them engaged, where it keeps sort of the flow going on. And I just figured, why not make it more interesting to read? Not more interesting as in like cutting parts of it out to dull it, but to sort of bring it to a different public, because we're not communicating correctly if this is what's happening. And the other reason, was because I really just love colorful and like cartoony, and why not do it?
Sure. I mean, I think that there's so much power in finding different ways to communicate these issues, because in my opinion, I think that I agree with you 100%. What you just said is that in a certain way, science as an institution has failed a little bit in their efforts to communicate what they're talking about, and kind of put themselves into a corner of walling off the people who really need to be able to understand and comprehend, engage with, and utilize the information that science as an institution works so hard to put out. And so I absolutely love what you do. I want to put, again, link below, definitely check it out. And then, of course, Ally, on kind of the other side of the spectrum, rangers traditionally exist to be kind of that welcoming face into our national parks and our public land system. And you did mention earlier that this year has been different, as it has for all of us. And so you have been putting out some digital content as well, which again is linked below. But I was wondering if you want to talk about the value of a ranger for the national park system, and how important it is to kind of be that face and be that welcoming hand into our public land system here in the US.
Sean, I'm gonna need to check out your website. It sounds amazing. I'm really pumped to check it out. I love working for the NPS. I feel very grateful that I get to work with so many amazing coworkers, not only here at this park, but I feel very confident and comfortable emailing people from over at Sequoia, or I was just emailing people from over in the East Coast, just trying to collaborate and work together to get our mission across, which is of course to communicate, well, part of it is to communicate resources to the public. And I think Rangers have a lot of trust, which is really nice. I feel like when I can put on this uniform, a lot of people will trust the information that I'm giving them, which is very intimidating. So I do a lot of like background research. And of course, when you start training, you always hear these facts that you tell visitors. And I always go back and find the scientific paper of those facts just to make sure that we're giving the public the right information. But that's really nice because putting on this uniform, people trust that I'm giving them correct information, and they usually don't contradict that. And I feel like the NPS has a really good way of communicating pretty large themes or lessons, subjects to the general public. And I feel like with the NPS, we do see a lot of people. And even when I'm just out on a trail, maybe if somebody's never seen a park ranger, maybe they've never been to a visitor center, never been on a park website, they just stumbled upon this trail on the side of 101, which happens more often than you think. But then all of a sudden we get to run into them because of where we work and what our job is. And all of a sudden I'm telling them about the size of a redwood cone and their eyes get really wide and they're like, no way, this huge tree comes from a cone that's olive sized. And it's really cool that the NPS gets to do that. And that's just, one part of the NPS. We also have all of our other rangers. We have management, we have all of our resource crew. And it's really amazing being able to connect what our resource crews are learning about the park and being able to interpret that and teach it to the public. We just got a 180-page email about the Redwood Creek watershed the other day and how it affects the redwood growth. And yeah, just like Sean, you were talking about, a lot of jargon in there, a lot of big words, not a lot of stuff that people are going to want to read. But as a ranger, I get to take that, digest it, and then bring it to the public and talk to them about why protecting that part of the park and that whole watershed was important to the old growth trees and such. Does that answer your question? There was a lot of different parts to it, so I want to make sure that I'm hitting all of it. I wrote it down. Hold on, let me glance at it. Okay.
I mean, you're the ranger. I'm not qualified to decide if it's good enough or not. So, well, thank you both, because I think those are both awesome examples of how important that public engagement is when it comes to discussing these different issues. And I'm almost done with you. I promise I'll let you get back to your busy lives again. But real quick, before I let you go, I'm just curious. Conservation and natural resources and environmentalism, whatever you want to call it, as a field, as an institution, is considered by many to be a little bit younger in terms of societal shifts and societal movements. And so are we also be considered a little bit younger, but here we are getting involved, trying to get our hands dirty and do something to help protect this planet that we all care about so much moving into the future. And so my last question for you, it's a little bit of a difficult one. What do you hope to see for the future of this field of environmentalism and of this green earth moving into the future in the next 50 years? What do you have hopes for moving forward?
Whew, what a question. I think that has so many answers in so many different directions. Just in terms of environmental education, it would be amazing to get a little bit more support, not only for environmental educators, but educators throughout the entire country that are teaching our kids about everything, especially the sciences and about nature, not only with money, which is always great, but with just general support of the public, understanding that what we do is, important, and there's a reason for us rangers being here in the visitor centers, not just to point out where the drive-through tree is, but to share information about the old growth trees and such. So that would be a big thing. In 50 years, hopefully everybody will be on board with climate change, and it won't be rebutted quite as much, and people will without a doubt say, yes, the climate is changing and this is what we are doing to change the climate, and this is how we can help. And in 50 years, I hope everybody is a steward in some way or another. I hope everybody understands that wasting water is awful, and plastic straws actually are that bad. Same with plastic bags. I'd love to see a decline in plastic. And I really hope in 50 years, there will be more people outside appreciating all of our national parks, not only national parks, but state parks. Parks, that little tiny plant that's growing through the sidewalk. I really feel for people in cities, but there are natural areas all around us. You just have to find it. And I hope in 50 years, people can find those areas, no matter what they are, and really, really appreciate it. And take the time to go look at those areas to find the happiness and all the beauty around them. Maybe 50 years, we can do another episode. I'll put it on my calendar.
I am 100% down for that. I've got no plans. But for me, I'd say in 50 years, I think that this, like the conservation, like environmentalism, I guess, movement will shift toward that is stunning. In the short amount of time that it's at least sort of like started to sort of pop up and spread, so many changes have been made from it because it's not something that can be shifted back or not shifted back, fought against. Like you can't say, we want to plant this tree because it's native and it's important for this species, this species, this species. It helps XYZ, cleans up some of the water waste and all that jazz. You can't combat that with like, but we've got all the evidence for what we're saying. So like, either move out the way or do it. And I'd love the fact that it's a science-based, science-built, and like the entire movement is just it's wholesome in all the best ways. And I think in 50 years, I'd love to see it expand out. And as you said, like focusing in cities, I'd love to see urban ecology become more of a thing, because many people don't realize I live in the middle of Oklahoma City, which is the third largest by area city in the US. And we have tons of birds here. Like I live across the street. Well, I live about walking distance from the state capitol. And just before we did the call, I was talking to Aaron and said I went out and was looking at birds. There were 24 different species that I saw in a 20-minute walk. And I'm in the middle of the city. Many people don't realize that you don't have to be far away. It's not this exotic thing to be out in nature. It's everywhere. You can be in your backyard. You can be looking out your window. I'd love that to be a bigger focus in 50 years, that you don't have to travel to enjoy nature. You just have to enjoy nature to enjoy nature.
Well, I don't know if there's any better way to end it than that. I think one thing, though, I do need to say is that I think in 50 years, let's see if we can't get a national park in Oklahoma. I don't know, Ally, who you have to talk to, but I say start passing that up the ladder. We got 50 years starting right now. So let's see if we can make it happen. But other than that, I just want to thank both of you so much for not only what you do for the people in your area, for helping to connect folks with nature, but also just being willing to share your time and your insight with me today. It means a lot that you're willing to come on and help us out with this.
If you guys want to learn more about the stuff that I do, you can follow me on the Instagram link below. And there's also a link to the website that I have that's a blog that I have. Post a lot of the information on what stuff we've talked about.
If you guys want to learn more about Redwood National and State Parks, you can follow us at Redwood NPS. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Flickr. We also have a YouTube channel with a ton of really cool educational videos on there as well.
Now, if you are in Oklahoma City, definitely, or in the area even, check out the Martin Nature Center and see if you can't track down Sean one of these days. And of course, if you're in California, definitely get out to Redwood State and National Park. But again, thank you both so much for being willing to join me today. And this has been Untamed Unfiltered, and we will see you all next time. Bye, everyone.